In Book 21 of the Iliad, we see the theme of consumption used as part of creation myth. Once Achilles' armor has been made by Hephaestus, he returns to battle and he fights the river god Xanthus, or Scamander. And Achilles' return is glorious. I mean, he kills many of the Trojans and drives them into the river Scamander, or the river god Xanthus, and there he fights the river god himself. And Hephaestus comes and helps him out and starts burning everything with his fire and consumes the trees and burns the bodies of the dead that Achilles had just killed. And the fire is like a consumption metaphor for this cult related to Hephaestus and, I argue, Yahweh and Moses from Exodus. And the religion needs people and civilizations to consume, so to speak, right? Women for these new generations of gods. And we can think of this fire of Hephaestus and torching everything with his flames as this spread of his cult and religion, right? And the different trees are like different races of or civilizations of men, like the metallic symbology. Or I'd argue the trees are symbolically how we understand the family tree today, or how we understand the Greek mythos as like family, or basically a genealogical catalog told through parables and narrative. And the religion itself is an expression of the race. And going furthermore, the river Scamander, which is a real river in modern day Turkey, was also known in the godlike form as Xanthus or Xanthos by Homer in the Iliad, which is also coincidentally the same name as Achilles' horse. But the meaning of the name Xanthus reveals something in that it means blonde hair, and it could also refer to a past king of Thebes. I think this helps confirm my theory that Book 21 is essentially a creation myth told through this consumption metaphor of Hephaestus. And he's scalding the river god Xanthus. And this is like a literary avatar for a blonde-haired king in his civilization. So let's read from the Iliad Book 21. On this, he, who is the river god Xanthus, or the river Scamander, upraised his tumultuous flood high against Achilles, seething as it was with foam and blood and the bodies of the dead. The dark waters of the river stood upright and would have overwhelmed the son of Peleus, but Hera, trembling lest Achilles should be swept away in the mighty torrent, lifted her voice on high and called out to Hephaestus her son. Crookfoot, she cried, my child, be up and doing, for I deem it is with you that Xanthus is fain to fight. Help us at once, kindle a fierce fire. I will then bring up the west, and the white south wind, and a mighty hurricane from the sea, that shall bear the flames against the heads and armor of the Trojans, and consume them, while you go along the banks of Xanthus, burning his trees, and wrapping around with fire. Let him not turn your back neither by fair words nor foul, and slacken not till I shout and tell you. Then you may stay your flames. On this, Hephaestus kindled a fierce fire, which broke out first upon the plain, and burned the many dead, whom Achilles had killed, and whose bodies were lying about in great numbers. By this means the plain was dried, and the flood stayed, as a north wind, blowing on an orchard that has been sodden with autumn rain, soon dries it, and the heart of the owner is glad. Even so the whole plain was dried, and the dead bodies were consumed. Then he turned tongues of fire onto the river. He burned the elms, the willows, and the tamarisk, the lotus, also with the rushes and marshy herbage that grew abundantly by the banks of the river. The eels and fishes that go darting about everywhere in the water, these two were sorely harassed by the flames that cunning Hephaestus had kindled, and the river itself was scalded, so that he spoke, saying, Hephaestus, there is no god hold his own against you. I cannot fight you when you flare out your flames in this way. Strive with me no longer. Let Achilles drive the Trojan out of the city immediately. What had I to do with this quarreling and helping people? He was boiling as he spoke, and all his waters were seething, as a cauldron upon a large fire boils when it is melting the lard of some fatted hog, and the lard keeps bubbling up all over when the dry faggots blaze under it. Even so were the goodly waters of the Xanthus heated with the fire till they were there boiling. He could flow no longer, but stayed his stream, so afflicted was he by the blast of fire which cunning Hephaestus had raised. Then he prayed to Hera, and besought her, saying, Hera, why should your son vex my stream with such especial fury? I am not so much to blame as all the others, who have been helping the Trojans. I will leave off, since you so desire it, and let son leave off also. Furthermore, I swear never again will I do anything to save the Trojans from destruction. not even when all of Troy is burning in the flames which the Canes will kindle. As soon as Hera heard this, she said to her son Hephaestus, Son Hephaestus, hold now your flames. We ought not to use such violence against a god for the sake of the mortals. When she had thus spoken, Hephaestus quenched his flames, and the river went back once more into his own fair bed. And we can compare and contrast this to the poem Enki's Journey to Nippur, where Enki creates his temple out of the Apsu, and in doing so creates the rivers with the fish and carp and the reeds and the trees on the riverbanks. But it's not fire and consumption, it's his temple he builds, and the Euphrates and Tigris River that he creates with his godliness and decrees. Here, Enki and his temple, or Achilles' shield, is this artifact made symbolizing the cult of the god, right? And Enki creates it, contrasted to this theme of consumption that we see with Yahweh and Hephaestus in Book 21 of the Iliad. With Enki, it's creation. Just imagine instead of the fire, it's the river or the water of Enki that's symbolizing the spread of his cult. The eels and fish that Hephaestus harasses with the fire are the same carp that Enki creates that go darting about in the reeds, right? And it's the same with the tree or punning pole or mace tree that Enki's temple symbolizes, and the shadow it casts as allegory for the spread of his cult. The shadow of the tree attracts animals like sheep to the watering holes. And obviously, shepherds, this metaphor grew out of the society of nomadic shepherds who would poach wild animals from herds at the watering holes. And most likely they were just females, and they were selecting for desirable females and desirable traits to be expressed in future generations to grow the most obedient and wooliest flock, right? And it's easy to see how this metaphor developed into religious text and literature and parable of these early Bronze Age religions, describing the even earlier prehistoric time and phenomena that this shepherd or waterhole god Enki formed out of. And so now let's read from Enki's Journey to Nippur. Lines 49 through 61. Enki's beloved Eridu, temple, whose inside is full of abundance, Apsu, life of the land, beloved of Enki, temple built on the edge, befitting the artful divine powers. Eridu, your shadow extends over the mist of the sea, rising sea without a rival, mighty, awe-inspiring river which terrifies the land. High citadel, standing firm on the earth, temple at the edge of the anger, a lion in the midst of the Apsu, lofty temple of Enki, which bestows wisdom on the land. Your cry, like that of a mighty rising river, reaches King Enki. Line 71 through 82. As it has been built, as Enki has raised Eridu up, it is an artfully built mountain which floats on the water. His shrine spreads out into the reed beds. Birds brood in its green orchards laden with fruit. The carp play among the honey herbs, and the carp dart among the small reeds. When Enki rises up, the fishes rise before him like waves. He, as the Apsu, stand as a marvel as he brings joy into the anger. But ultimately, we need to understand and equate both the consumption theme of the engulfing flames of Hephaestus and the shadow that is casted by the mace pole as metaphor for the spread of this Semitic religion worshipping these chthonic gods. The only difference would be the moralizing effect on the audience, right? Whether you are the one who needs to be consumed in order for this religion to be dominant, or if you're this chosen class of people where this consumption is in fact creation. Like plagues of hail and locusts or consumption, themes that act as creation myth for the Israelites, where the locusts are like the religion or influence of Yahweh, where eventually every house is filled with them, even the pharaohs. And Enki, we know as from the poem Enki in the World Order, someone who makes the people dwell in their houses and makes them safe. And the locusts or the religion of Yahweh is consumptive. Literally, all the way up to the officials have to take part in it. By the time the Hebrews are done with the Egyptians, they have nothing. The subversion has reached the highest levels of the religion itself, of the Egyptians. And like the Pharaoh soon is going to end up bending to the will of Yahweh. And the allegory is that every single living thing that has been touched and consumed by this cult of Yahweh with the hail and locust, it corrupts them on a generational level at the house, where this new god is not what their ancestors worshipped. And I interpret this like causing strife, a lot like what we see today, where a lot of traditions and customs have come under increasing scrutiny. And it seems like today everything needs to be deconstructed and critiqued that isn't broken necessarily, but it's necessary for those who wish to create or maintain this world order, that all must be consumed. And this is essentially how the Iliad ends, with the fires consuming Hector's body in the funeral pyre. We know what happens to Troy. This once great civilization is left in ruin, and no one really makes it out of it. In the Odyssey, we find Achilles in Hades, and we know Agamemnon is killed by his wife Clytemnestra. It's the beginning of the end of the Bronze Age, and it ends in the fire of Hephaestus, or I understand Yahweh, which is not to say the end of these Semitic religions worshipping chthonic gods. It's just the end of a race or age of man, like the end of the Bronze Age. Again, the consumption is creation for another. One must be demoralized for another to be moralized. And another somewhat related subject is the numerology involved with the consumption motif, and that's the number 7, where the plague of blood starts in Exodus 7. And Hephaestus consumes the river Scamander in Book 21, or 777, 7 plus 7 plus 7. And in Enki's journey to Nippur, which I think we can probably say is analogous to Exodus, in line 70 of there is where Enki creates the fish and reeds. And it's these lines with the fish that I link it with Book 21 of the Iliad and Exodus 7 and the plague of blood. And most think the 777s, or 7 at least, is lucky. Just think of Las Vegas. The whole city is based on this superstition of 7 and sevens. Also, we know it as Sin City, and it's associated with this conspicuous consumption, right? And just think about having cleaned out your pockets or lost all your money under this illusion of creation of wealth or doing something constructive. But ultimately, your loss or depletion of resources is another's gain and is used to create these huge casinos in the desert where nothing should be growing, as well as spread their influence on U.S. geopolitics across the whole world. And it's not just casinos and the Las Vegas desert we can associate with 7 and consumption. It's also, like, for Sunday, for Christians, is considered a day of feasting. Like in England, they have Sunday roast. In America, after church lunch or dinner with families, it's pretty traditional. And like Italians in New York, New Jersey, right? We know them for their Sunday dinners and gravy. It's a day of religious consumption and feasting that we can associate with this number 7. So yeah, I say we can go ahead and say Yahweh and Hephaestus. We can understand them as the same, and we relate them to this number 7 and this consumption motif. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and look out for the next one in this series exploring the similarities between the Sumerian god Enki and the Greek god Hephaestus, along with the Hebrew deity Yahweh. See ya!